we have actually gone through on the MCO here in Malaysia, and how did we overcome this challenge that we actually gone through. Now, before we start, a little bit of housekeeping. How we're going to do this is this whole session should be roughly around 45 to 60 minutes, 45 minutes to an hour. And how we're going to do is, as I go on, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A section under the chats. And from there, my colleague Hema will look into questions, and then we will handle questions as we go along. All right. So that is what that is what we will do. And from that, I hope to be able to assist or even give you some pointers of what has actually gone through. What has actually KDU gone through over here. It's a very interesting journey you will actually see. Okay, this virtual academic series is something that the Teaching and Learning Center thought of. The Teaching and Learning Center from Selangor, University College and also college, and also our partners and our good friends in Penang. Okay, so as you can see on the schedule over here, today on the 21st, we are going to talk about pre-delivery checklist for online lessons. Then on the 29th, it is going to be online assessment. Now, this online assessment component, it will be conducted by our colleagues in Penang, Mr. Lo Lian Lee and also Ms. Leong Michelle. They will actually bring you on a journey of the online assessment methods that could be implemented on, when we are looking into virtual education itself. Then on the 4th of June, we are going to, you will come back to PJ, and then what we are going to do is we are going to talk a little bit about the modified flipped classroom. Now, we know what a flipped classroom is, but when we do things virtually, things may not work out as how it is if we are following the basic literature and best practices. So what we have is we have a session on this modified flipped classroom. This will be managed and led by Miss Hema, my colleague over there, as you can see. She is well versed in the practices of flipped classroom. She has used this many times in class, in her classes, and also in the way that she runs her online sessions. So that can also be a very, very interesting session. So ladies and gentlemen, what I can say is all these three sessions touch on different areas that we can benefit from. Now, what I would like to say is also, we are not a definitive guide over here. So please take note, all of these are not definitive guides. These are not the practices that must be followed. But what we have in mind is to give you the practices that we at UOW Malaysia KDU here have tried. And after trying, we feel that it was effective. So we hope that at the end of the day, if you can pick up maybe one or two key elements, then it is good enough. It is good enough. We don't expect you to practice everything, but if you can pick one or two that will fit your organization, and that is what we are looking for. It's a key sharing session that all of us can benefit from. All right. Okay, so for today's session, as you can see, today's session, we are going to discuss about the pre-delivery checklist for online lessons. Now, how did we come about to have this pre-delivery checklist topic? What we have seen is many a times when we look at virtual academic series or webinars, many a times it is stressing quite a bit on the matters of during the delivery, during the class itself. Yes, well and good, that is very important. But what we found was also it is important for us to look at what about the pre-delivery checklist? What do we need to do before the classes actually start? What do we need to do? So as we were discussing, and then also through our observations of classes, we found out that there were a lot of key practices that needs to be done to ensure that we have a solid foundation before we deliver the class. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to walk you through 13 key elements that here in UOW Malaysia, we have identified based on us speaking with our colleagues, based on us observing their classes, and based on our practices itself. Now, these 13 are basically based on our practices. So we hope that what we can share with you will be beneficial for you to use in your organization also. All right. So let me just go down here. Now, as you can see, this is a clear sharing session, okay, on the best practices. So it is a sharing session, and today we have many of our audiences are from different schools and organizations. I have secondary school teachers, primary school teachers, tertiary school lecturers, and so on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it a little bit more general to target all of these different demands of the teachers itself. So not so much only for secondary school or primary school or maybe tertiary education, it is going to be a more general snapshot of these best practices itself. All right, so are we ready? So I think we are. Emma, are you fine?
All good here.
Right, all good. So maybe just to start it out a little bit, Hema, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi everyone. I'm Hema from the Teaching and Learning Center. I'm a senior lecturer with KDU, UOW Malaysia KDU, and I basically do training for staff, workshops, and stuff like that.
All right, thank you very much, Emma. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off the session now. As we go along, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask, and Emma will handle those questions. Okay? Now, when we are looking at these best practices, it is important for us to understand that many a times it is very much institutional based. And because of that, I'm going to take things from a very bigger perspective. We are not going to look at things such as like hardware first. We are going to look at it in the more pedagogical element. So we are going to start off with something very simple. The first thing that we actually need to look at, all right, when we are doing a pre-delivery checklist, is we need to review the lesson learning outcome. Okay, so example, are we talking about a history lesson? Are you teaching history, sejarah, for example? Is it communication skill? Are you teaching English? Are you teaching human resources or marketing? Or maybe it could be a science subject. So the first thing on the pre-delivery checklist is understand your learning outcome. For example, let's say we take, for example, history. Sejarah is what you call it in Malaysia, in Malaysia itself. So in history, there are many different parts, there are many different chapters. So the first thing is, before you start even designing or coming up with a lesson, is let's look at the chapter. Let's look at what are the lesson learning outcomes that we would like to achieve for that particular lesson itself. So let's take, for example, we are going to use Malaysia during World War II. All right. So that will be, so what is the outcome that we would like to achieve at the end of the day? So this is very much following our syllabus. Now, this is very important because we really need to understand that students' achievement, we need to ensure that they achieve that particular lesson learning outcome. And the methods that we use for them to achieve that lesson learning outcome can be varied, but it's clear that we ourselves need to be very clear on the lesson learning outcome itself. So that is the first stage. Okay, not just say, okay, we're going to do online, just let's start doing online virtual classes. No, we look clearly at our course syllabus. Okay, so let's say we take, for example, history, World War 1940 to 1945 in Malaysia. That's just an example. So the second part over here is, in that particular lesson itself, you need to further understand in your review of the lesson learning outcome, what kind of skills that the students will need to gain. So when we look at it as, okay, let's say I'm going to teach history. So history is students will need to understand about the history of Malaysia in 1940 to 1945. What other things do they need to achieve? Are there certain skills that the students will need to achieve? Or are there certain, if you look into tertiary education, we talk about the domains. Is it more about the cognitive for them to think? Is it practical skill? Do we require them to do presentation skills? Or is it, or is there a key requirement for us to assess teamwork, like teamwork over here? So history will be the syllabus. Then the second part you need to look at will be what skills do you want the students to attain. So for example, if you are teaching history, so the knowledge part is important. So the thinking side, maybe you want the cognitive side. But in your syllabus, in your design, you also want to develop presentation skills in your student. You want to develop presentation skills in your student. So this is where you need to think, how am I going to integrate presentation skills with this chapter on history, like for example, Malaysia 1940 to 1945, in an online environment. So now you are clearer. Okay, you are clearer. You're not just teaching them about history, but you also want to achieve certain skills that they want to attain. So this is where a pre-delivery checklist is critical, the first part over there. All right. Now, as we see from this element over here, the key skills can be varied. For example, if you are looking at, you want to develop group work, communication skills and group work, as you can see over here, then when you design the lesson itself, you would want to integrate more elements of where students can do work. For example, even in history classes, you can get students to do group work. You can get students, like maybe randomly, your class of 30, break them down into groups of 5. Then you have 6 groups, and ask them to evaluate certain key elements of what has happened during that time. And when even in an online environment, it is important. It is also very, very feasible for them to work together. And this, what you're doing is, even in an online environment, you're encouraging group work with your students. Which is also very important, because as you know, in education, it is not only the knowledge that is important. We want to develop the character, the personality of the student. So all of these are critical, especially if you're looking into the primary and secondary school environment over there. So this is where we integrate. Because what we observe is, many a times when we see our colleagues run online classes, they are thinking too much on the cognitive element. How much does a student know? How much does a student know? So what it has become an environment where the teacher or the lecturer or the facilitator is like force feeding knowledge into the student. Okay, it's force feeding. Okay, and when you think about it, how much can the student take? Okay, and also, not only how much can the student take, but this may not be the key element for us that is important to develop the student itself, because the development of the student comes in many different areas. All right, so that is number 2. Now, what is number 3 over here? Now, once you already develop it, once you already know your lesson learning outcome and what skills do you want the students to get, then you divide the lesson into smaller packets. Okay, you divide the lesson into smaller packets. Now, I took one very simple example over here. Let's say I'm doing events management. I'm teaching events. Okay, events itself. So in events, we got, how do you do sponsoring an event? Okay, so that is week number 4, lesson sponsoring an event. Okay, so the idea is, at the end of the day, students need to learn how to get sponsors for an event. So what I will do is, I will break this down into smaller packets. Okay, so I have packet 1, what is sponsorship? Then also we'll have trends, influencing the trends in sponsorship. Then I have packet 2 and packet 3. Now, what are these packets? Some of you may not want to use the word packets. Some of you may want to use things such as like modules or so on. But I like to use the word packets, because it's like small little packets that, upon achieving each of these packets, that we will go on. So the key element here is, break it down into smaller packets. Now, the reason why this is effective is because of the part on feedback. Later, when we are going to discuss on the part of feedback, it is important for us to understand that the smaller the packets, the easier and more accurate the feedback is going to be. And feedback is going to be critical when we are looking at students' understanding of the topic. All right, I hope you guys are following. All right, okay. Now, if there are any questions, feel free to ask the questions in the Q&A. My colleague Hema will look into the questions, and then she will then ask the questions. Hema?
So far, no questions yet.
Okay, all right, okay, good. So example, sponsoring an event, you break it down into 3 packets. As you can see, this little pie over here, the total lesson is this whole pie. So you break it down into smaller parts, smaller parts that are easier to bite. All right. 4. Then you design activities for each packet. So as you saw in packet 1, it is what is sponsorship and trends influencing the trends in sponsorship itself. Okay, so those are the subtopics of this packet 1. So what I would do is, we will put activities. How are we going to deliver this packet to our audience? So example over there, it could be video and lectures. Now, here is where you will need to strategize. If we are talking about sponsorship, if this is the beginning, this is the start, you will want to start on a high. So maybe you would like to put some videos inside to show the students. Okay, students, this is what are the impacts of sponsorship like. Then after that, we will have the lecture. The lecture is the key part or the explanation part on what are the key trends that are happening in sponsorship. Always remember, like I would like to stress to all my colleagues, is always make sure students get the must-knows. Now, what are the must-knows and good-to-knows? For some of you, I believe you are very well versed in this. Must-knows are knowledge that is critical to have in this particular lesson. That is the must-know. Good to know are any level of knowledge that the students is good for them to know, but it is not critical. Many times, this good to know can be where the students self-develop and self-research from. Okay, so if you're talking about the marketing mix, okay, so the must know will be example simply maybe the 7 P's, the 7 P's. That is the must know. Then the good to know will be the emphasis or the explanation towards it itself. Okay, so the must know is the key theory of that topic. So when you look into each packet, you need to understand what are the must knows that the student must know from this. That is the thing that at the end of the packet, student must be able to demonstrate their knowledge of this must know. Okay, so that is important. So when you do your pre-delivery checklist, when you come out with your lesson plan, you break your lesson down into its individual packets. Then in the individual packets, you put what are the must knows. These are the key elements of must know. Then you put your activities. What are the activities? I use video, I use lecture, I use discussion, so many things of the activities for you to use to ensure that the student achieve this packet. Okay. Then what happens? When you design, you must always also evaluate. So this is where ensuring achievement of each packet before proceeding to the next packet. So before you can go to packet 2, always remember packet 1 needs to be achieved. Okay, so how do we do that? So how do we do that is formative feedback will be critical over here. Now, as you know, there are 2 types of feedback. We have formative and we have also summative feedback. Now, formative feedback in an online environment is very difficult. Why? Let me give you an example. In a classroom physical environment, formative feedback, most of us will take body language as the key formative feedback that we get from our students. Example, you'll be lecturing for 10 minutes. After lecturing for 10 minutes, you just look at your 30 students in front of you, and all of them give you a look of bewilderment. So automatically, before you can even ask them, do you understand? You already have a sense in your mind that maybe they don't understand. Maybe they are not understanding certain of these key concepts. So what you will do, you will then do rectification processes. Now, in an online environment, it becomes a little bit more difficult. How do you know whether your students understand? It's not that easy. If you ask the students, do you understand? I can bet you majority of them won't even ask you a question. Okay, so what we can do is, this is where it is important for us to maybe want to use technology. Now, here we can use technology like Kahoot. Kahoot is actually a very good application that allows for assessment of the student in a very gamified method. So what happens is, you put questions in Kahoot, especially questions of the must-knows. Remember, must-knows are key critical or key theoretical elements that student must get from this particular packet itself. So you test students using Kahoot. Upon completion, if you see that the percentage of understanding is below 80%, your class understanding is below 80%, then it rings something in your mind. 20% of my students don't understand certain elements. This is where you repeat. This is where you identify which parts that they do not understand and you emphasize on it. Okay, over here, this is what we do. Then this is where you further elaborate on the key elements. As for questioning, if your class is big, this is where you may also, if your class is big, it can be a bit of a challenge if you want to do questioning online, but it is also important and it is also a very good method for us to do questioning. We can go online, we see our students saying, go, John, what do you think of? Then after that, you work on, after John, you get Ali, then you get Samantha, and so on. So you create the environment where students feel that, oh, I'm going to be asked, I'm going to be asked. So it is so that they are ready, they are paying attention in class. So this is where I always advise my colleagues, call the student, then only give the question. Don't give the question, then call the student. Okay, so call the student, John, what do you think of? Okay, or something like that. Okay, now in the next part over here, pre-delivery checklist. So these are the key packets. Once you have your feedback, once you know your feedback, once it is okay, then only you go on to the next level. Okay, then you go on to the next packet. So another pre-delivery checklist that I would like to discuss, number 6 over here. So we are already on a number 6 from the total of 13 we have here is the achievement of lesson. Sorry, Emma?
Okay, hi Gabe. I interrupt you for a while. We have
Go ahead.
here from Eng Lei Chu. What is the maximum packs for online teaching and the maximum hours?
Okay, there is no maximum packs for online teaching. I have done classes exceeding 150. It actually works. They are lectures. But maximum hours, I would say, based on my experience and based on what I got, what I've done, I will put as 1 hour per session. 1 hour per session. So if you are given 2 hours, what you can do is you can break your sessions down into smaller chunks. Like in 2 hours, you can complete 3 packets, for example. Remember the packets we were talking about? So after packet 1, you do assessment. Then you do something fun. So then you go on to the second packet. Then in individual packets, the lecture, the face-to-face lecture, the synchronous lecture may only be half an hour, 20 minutes to half an hour, whereas the activities will take most of the time over there. You must understand, ladies and gentlemen, for students to concentrate on the screen is much more difficult than they would if they are in the classroom environment. Right? Okay. I hope I understand. I explained the question. Okay.
Okay, there's another question about free apps that are for interactive questioning.
Okay. On that. On free apps for questioning, there are many, but based on my experience, I am a user of Kahoot. So far, I've enjoyed using Kahoot, and I find that Kahoot has been very effective in the running of my classes. So I would dare say that Kahoot will be a good app that if you would like to use. But of course, there are many different apps in the market which you can explore, and they're readily available.
What is the ratio you would suggest, Gabe, for online interactive sessions? The appropriate ratio, student ratio?
Students to lecturers ratio.
Yep.
All right. In that matter, if you're looking into lessons itself, as the lecture itself, the lecture can go as high as even more than 100 students. Now, it is not fixed per se that what is the best ratio. It goes back to what you are planning to achieve. Now, as I would like to stress upon a little bit here, if you're planning to do demonstrations and it is more direct feedback demonstrations, like for example, if we are doing art classes, ladies and gentlemen, let's say we're doing art. So I would want students to learn how to paint something like this. Let's say this is the painting over here. All right. So what I will do is the class will need to be small, maybe 10 to 15. 2 days before the lesson, I would give this drawing to my students. My students will do an outline sketch. So on that day of the lesson, when the students come in, they will show me the outline sketch in the morning, and I will comment one by one. After that, I will teach them how to do painting, and from there they will go on. So in an online environment, what I will do is I will, for matters like that in a very practical sense, I will have actually small classes because it is a very practical element. Now, if I'm teaching marketing, for example, easily 100, 150 students, it is still possible on the lecture component. But on the discussion component, then it could be smaller. Okay, it could be smaller then. All right.
What is your advice, Gabe, for ratio of teaching and interactive exercise? How many hours would you allocate for teaching and how many hours would you allocate for interactive exercises?
Okay, basically, I look at the 40-60. Now, this is not fixed in stone, ladies and gentlemen, 40-60. Actually, that is something I will actually handle in the next, that should be a pre-checklist number 8. Don't worry, but I think I'll talk about it now. Synchronous and asynchronous, both of these are very important, okay? So what I will do is on the synchronous side, face-to-face, 40%. Okay, 40%. Now, this is not fixed in stone, ladies and gentlemen. These are just best practices that I've seen and I myself practice. Asynchronous, 60%. It is still very important to have the synchronous component. That means the face-to-face lectures. Now, these face-to-face lecturers are not recorded lecturers, guys. These are real face-to-face lecturers online. So it should be around 40%. All right. Now, it also varies depending on the level of the student. Now, if it is a level, if you look into the MQF levels, if it's levels 2, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, which are more certificate level and early diploma level, then your face-to-face may need to be more. Okay. Whereas if you're going on a higher level, what happens is your face-to-face can go down. It also varies depending on the course itself. The course, what are you actually discussing? If you are doing something very practical, butchery, pastry, of course, the face-to-face elements will need to be more. Okay, and so this varies, but I like to play around on the 40-60%. Okay, so maybe I will just continue with this checklist number 6, and from there, as we go on, I will take more questions. Will that be fine, Emma?
Yes, Gabe.
All right.
So look more later.
All right. Okay. So checklist number 6 is achieving lesson learning outcome goals. Now, here is exactly, I mean, this is linked to what we said earlier on. Lesson learning outcomes can be planned by duration. All right. So, for example, you can actually plan your lesson learning outcomes by the week. Okay, take a week to complete the lesson learning outcomes. This will comprise of 2 hours face-to-face online lesson and work given on the learning management system. So there are 2 ways of looking at it. Now, here this is where I would like to explain a little bit more. Let's take, I'm teaching marketing. And as I'm teaching marketing, I'm supposed to complete this particular chapter called the marketing mix. Now, I can complete the learning outcome of the marketing mix, chapter 3, for example, in a 4-hour lecture. So Monday, 2 hours face-to-face, and Tuesday, 2 hours face-to-face. I do all my assessment and it is done. So that is actually a replacement of the more traditional element of face-to-face classes that we used to do before the MCO, correct? Now, another way is we put a week, okay, from Monday to Sunday. So we give students 7 days to achieve the same goal. It means you can have 2 hours lectures, then you can have activities in your LMS, your learning management system, and then you have online assessments. And at the end of the day, at the end of the week, you get students to write a reflective essay or in a way to demonstrate their understanding of that particular lesson learning outcome. Now, so there are 2 ways over here that we see. So what we see over here is it could be a 2 hours lesson for 2 days, and after that you complete, or it could be stretched out. Now, in a classroom environment, when we do lectures, what happens is the feedback from the students is immediate. So we know whether the students understand or not. But when you look into a virtual environment, the ball is in a different park. Okay, so basically what happens is that may not be so effective. So for many of you teachers, I would like to suggest let's experiment. Let's experiment in such a way where we stretch the duration of achievement. Give it 1 week. For this chapter, we give students 1 week for them to achieve. Then we put in different assessments or different activities to demonstrate their understanding. So we are in a way giving time, letting students adapt, letting students achieve their own learning outcome. It means like this. Some students are very good, very intelligent students. Today, 2-hour lecture. After that, they have activities. They finish all the activities in the same day. All well and good. That means the student has achieved the week's lesson learning outcome in 1 day. No problem. But not all students are like that. Some students will need more time to absorb. So this can be a very good way. Okay, so this checklist number 6 over here is how do you plan the achievement of lesson learning outcome goals. Don't put don't put yourself in the box. Don't be so rigid to say that at the end of these 4 hours face-to-face lecture that I'm doing, students must understand this, because all students are different. All students will adapt differently, and this may not be the best method. Okay, now as I said earlier on, remember that I was coming to this. Number 7, understand the level of your audience. So we have synchronous versus asynchronous. Over here, it is important for us to understand that synchronous elements is still very important, very, very critical. Where we want, it is important for us to show the students that we are there. The reason is because learning is not only about reading. Take for example what I'm doing. As you can see the little video that I'm in over there. My body language, okay, my hands, the way that I move my hands and so on. These are key elements in emphasizing importance. Okay, it's emphasizing importance itself. So your students are also adapting in the same element. So if you're thinking, okay, I'm going totally online now, so this is going to be just putting notes and then let students read on their own. Yes, students can read, but it's difficult for you to emphasize on the importance of certain key components. So I would always want to stress, it must be a good balance of synchronous versus asynchronous over here. And if you're doing synchronous, you are doing videos, please have your video on. Have your video on. Don't switch the video off, because facial expression, as later I will explain, facial expression is a key element to emphasize your excitement, importance, or even dissatisfaction of the whole session itself. So this is very important. Okay, and the higher level you go, that is where you can adjust. So the percentage is actually sliding in such. It's not fixed in stone, but this is what I normally see. The higher level a student is, if you're looking at postgraduate studies, higher level of postgraduate studies, then the level of asynchronous method of delivery can be increased. But if you're looking at lower level certificate, diploma, or even maybe younger secondary, then synchronous is very important. You must be there, because repetition is important. Okay, and this is where, when even in the element of repetition, the general concept, as I believe some of you or some of my colleagues always hear me say, tell, show, do, apply, the key element. This tell, show, do is actually a theory that was widely used in nursing teaching, and it is so critical over here. You tell, you show, and you do. Okay, when you practice the do element, the level of understanding is so much higher. So when you look into synchronous element, when you're online itself, you are there, you can actually guide the students. Itself, because you must always understand, students are also worried. Students are also very worried. This technology can be also be very new to them. So them being worried, we need to be the sounding board to tell them whether they are doing well or not. Okay, so on this element, I would like to say, in the general context, 60-40 is good, but of course it depends on the level of your audience also. Okay. Now, number 8, pace yourself. Okay, number 8 is to pace yourself. So here what we see is, as I stress, 2 hours online face-to-face lesson is very tiring and strenuous. Okay, very, very tiring, because the level of concentration over there, the facilitator will need to give, and also on the student is concentrating on the screen. So based on what I observed in my colleagues in UOW KDU over here, 1 hour sessions are the best. So even if you have a 2 hour session, you want to break it down. You want to break it down, put in activities, and create hills and valleys. Now, what are hills and valleys? Hills and valleys are different emotional feelings that students feel in class. So sometimes you have lectures normally what you call are stagnant or valleys. Then you have activities and it goes up as a hill. Students get excited. So by the shifting of these hills and valleys, you create that interest in the student. All right. So if it's going to be a constant 2 hour lecture, ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be very, very challenging, not only for you, but also for your student. All right. Emma, would you like to take some questions?
The question here is on, for 5 learning outcomes of must-haves, what is the ideal hour that includes past year question exercises?
Okay,
I
so
think
the
the
question.
concern is about technical papers like ACCA.
Okay.
So they don't want to lose out the exam aspect of it, the exam seating, exam style, exposure, experience the students need.
So you're talking about the assessment part of it, is that right?
Right. The practice for the assessment.
The practice was now. In every lesson, in every syllabus, in the development of a syllabus, there are key aspects which the student must achieve. These are called the course learning outcomes. So these course learning outcomes will then drive the must-knows. However it is, ladies and gentlemen, you must ensure that the student know the must-knows. Does it mean that you are the one teaching the must-know? No. Students can attain the must-knows on their own also. They can attain on their own, but you need to guide them. So based on what I would like to just I would not say suggest, but just as a pointer, I would like to say that for all the must-knows, if you look into your course syllabus, these are the key must-knows. These are the things that the student must have. These are the key knowledge that the student must have. How you do it will be up to you. Okay, so now what is going to happen is the shift from the face-to-face, the traditional face-to-face, to the online environment. That is what is creating the anxiety in all of us, because we know, I mean, all of you are teachers, you know what are the key must-knows that the student needs to have. And the thing is, many of you in your mind, for me to achieve these must-knows, I've been doing for the past many years, I do face-to-face classes. And now I don't have the environment, I don't have that comfort to do it. So how am I going to achieve that same outcome? That is where the challenge is. Which I can assure you, let me say it is actually very much the stress of many of our teachers. Okay, but what I want to say is the must-knows will still need to be achieved. How you achieve it, whether you guide the students, whether you do lecture to the students, all of this will be up to you, but that is still critical over there. Okay? So pace yourself, pace yourself. I look at it as maximum a 1 hour session. Even in a 1 hour session, it is always advisable to break the 1 hour session down into smaller parts. And always remember, beginning of a lesson is always a recap. Recap what is previous lesson. Then tell them what you're going to learn today. Teach them what of the day's lesson. Do a summary of the day's lesson, and in the summary you emphasize on the must-knows. Then when everything is done, give them a preview of the next lesson, like a trailer, So if you're teaching chapter 3, first part linked to chapter 2. Students, today's chapter we're going to talk about this. This is how it is linked to our previous lesson, because students' mind, there is this thing called relation. for them, it is easier to relate. If they can see the relation of topics and chapters, it becomes easier for them to understand and remember. So when you complete chapter 3, everything done already, very good. Then you say, oh, students, next week we are going to start on chapter 4. And chapter 4, we are going to talk about this. And this is, how do we get that? It comes from this week's chapter. So students can have something to look forward to. Wow, this is what I'm going to see. This is what I'm going to get. Okay, so pace yourself, ladies and gentlemen, pace yourself. Now, then number 9. Number 9 is quite unique over here. Plan to use as many senses as possible. Now, you may say, online, how do I use senses? Yes, you still can. That means if we look into generally, I know some of you may say we have 6 senses. You may be the blessed one, but most of us will only have 5. Okay. What we are trying to do here is the more senses you use, the general understanding and comprehension of the student will be higher. Okay, so this is something that over here at KDU we encourage our colleagues to do. So, for example, if you are doing synchronous teaching and you just want to use sound, okay, so you don't want to show your face. You don't want to show your face because you're shy. So say, don't worry, Gabe. I will do my lecture. I will just dictate my lecture. I'll read from the notes. I don't want to put my face. So what is happening is you are only targeting the hearing side on your student, only the hearing side. So this is 1/5. Okay, fine and good. It's good. Yeah, fine, without any problem. But what happens is if you are there on video, so there is also sight over here. Okay, so students not only hear you, but students can see your body language. And by seeing your body language, what happens, it encourages or it further drives the way that they learn. Now, what about touch, smell, and taste? If possible, very good. Let's say you're doing a culinary class. So not only do you explain to them what garlic is, you show them a garlic, and maybe a day or before you ask them, students, bring garlic on that day. Then after that, when they have the garlic, you say, okay, break the garlic, smash it on your fingers, smell. What do you get? Now, what smell do you get? Then feel the texture of the garlic. Now put it in your mouth and taste it. Because if you would like to describe the taste of garlic, ladies and gentlemen, it's actually very difficult. How do you really describe? Sometimes some people use the word spicy, pungent, strong smelling. The descriptive element of even garlic itself becomes so difficult. So this is where I encourage my colleagues, if possible, show. If possible, show. Okay, if possible, let them smell, touch, or even taste, if possible. All right, but I understand that not many of these will be possible virtually. But virtually, I believe hearing and at least eyesight will be possible over there. So when you plan your lesson, guys, plan it in such a way that there is that you stimulate at least the sight and hearing of your audience. The more you can do, the better it is. All right, but the sight and hearing is critical. And sight is something like you show them videos, you show videos and so on. It really catches their attention. All right. Okay. Emma, are you fine?
Yeah, Gabe.
Uh-huh.
There are a few questions here.
Sure. Go
Do you
ahead.
want to take some?
Yes. Let's take one first.
Okay. This is from Wendy from Fame International College.
Hi, Wendy.
Her question is, what is the suggested time for formative assessments like exercises, quiz? She understands there are different students have different learning speed and pace. So let's say she has 2 packets in a 3-hour class session.
Okay, very good.
What is the suggested time for exercises or quiz?
Okay, Wendy, if you have 3 hours, you have 2 packets. I really do not know how big your packets are, but generally I would suggest the synchronous face-to-face lecture that what we are doing, half an hour, 40 minutes max. Do an activity. The activity that you do is the formative feedback. So immediately you do after that, you will know what is the understanding, the must-knows of the student to that first packet. Then you will have time. You will take another 10 to 15 minutes to rectify any issues that if you have. That means if the students still do not understand things, you have that a little bit more time. After that, give the students a break. Students really need to break. During the break time, you can do many things. Okay, students, take a 10-minute break before we go on to the next packet. Or you can say, hey, students, this is the break time, but I'm going to show you a video. This video is something very unique in relation to the first packet, or a trailer to the second packet. You see, then after that, once that is clear, then you start on the second packet. So if you look at the first packet, 3 hours divided into 2 packets, we are looking at 1.5 hours. But the key lecture time can only be maybe around maximum 40 minutes. I will look at it maximum 40 minutes. Anything more than that, we are really stretching it. Really stretching it. Okay, this is based on the experience that I have in my observation of tertiary students, students here at KDU itself. Now, for secondary school, higher secondary, I believe it's also quite the same. For lower, even for if you're looking at primary school, the packets I would suggest to be even smaller. Even smaller. Knowledge, 15 minutes. You're teaching them 10 to 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, and then that is how your packet will be maximum 20 minutes to 25 minutes with formative feedback. Okay. All right. So I will go on to the next checklist. Then as we on, we will come back to questions. Would that be fine, Hema?
Yeah, sure. We've got 2 more though.
Okay, all right. Now, so we have already seen the preparation of the courses, the preparation of the syllabus itself. Now, that is one part. The next part that we need to look at, number 10 over here, is the study of the tools for your audience, the tools. So here we see this is our audience over here, our students over here. So when you do your pre-delivery checklist, you need to understand, number one, do they have laptops? Okay. If they have laptops, what is their broadband access? Do they have fast broadband? All right. What kind of access do they have? What about mobile phones? Okay, mobile phones. What kind of mobile phones do they have? Or if they have mobile phones, and do they have unlimited data plans? Because we cannot just jump to say that all students must use laptops in their teaching or in their learning, because some students may not have this. So this is critical. So many of us, when we think about synchronous teaching, we think about, okay, we are going to use Skype, we are going to use WebEx and so on, but there could be some students who do not have this. So what do we do? So it is important for us, the first part here is to understand what tools do our audience have. So if our audience do not have these key elements, then maybe the usage of WhatsApp, the simple WhatsApp on a mobile phone, can be a critical element. So this is where it becomes a challenge, ladies and gentlemen. Let's take, for example, you have 30 people in your class. Okay? 2 students tell you, sir, ma'am, I'm very sorry, I got no laptop, I got no data. Does that mean that they lose out? No, they don't lose out. So this is where we as facilitators or teachers will need to take responsibility. So you say, okay, for the 28 students, I will have lessons, okay, online, okay, synchronous, asynchronous. But for these 2 students, they cannot be left out. So we need to use different methods of tools and skill and technology to target them. It could be using WhatsApp, sending them notes and what do you call that, questions through WhatsApp itself. Okay, and this is already stretching it because some students may not even have mobile phones. Now, if you're looking into a tertiary level of study, I believe nearly all of my students will have mobile phones. Okay, but not all of them have laptops, definitely. And that is something that we have actually found out. And during the MCO, what we have identified is some students went back to their hometown, and they don't have fast internet access. Yeah, because in the hometown, there was no need for it. Students did their work in college, and they did not need fast internet access. So what happens is we had a little bit of a conundrum over there. It was a bit of a challenge. How do we do? So we here at KDU, we actually decided we do our best to the majority, but for those who do not have, we still make sure that they achieve the required learning. Okay, maybe not video conferencing immediately if they don't have the bandwidth, but we send them things through email. Okay, so email, at least if even though your broadband is not so fast, you can receive the mails, you can see the notes, you can link to YouTube when the line gets better. Okay, so these are the things that we need to do. So ladies and gentlemen, another pre-delivery checklist. Don't just have in your mind, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do this. Padahal at the end of the day, students cannot access. So very important here. Okay. Then when you have, let's say you have decided you are going to use my laptop. Another housekeeping, very important. Check your tools. At the initial stage of the MCO in the first week, let me tell you, this is no joke. I mean, we have experienced so many issues of video cams not working for our lecturers. It happens. Why? Because they have never used it, so they do not know how to use. Not because it is not working, because they do not know how to use. All right. So this is important over here. Housekeeping. Check your tools. Your laptop. How is the sound? How is the video? Then if you're looking at the application itself, if you're using Zoom, if you're using Skype, if you're using WebEx, for example, do you have the correct application? Have you downloaded the application? Have you installed the application? Do you need administrative rights to install this application? If you do, you got to make sure everything is done properly first. And for mobile phones, based on our experience that we have gone through, firmwares. Now, what is a firmware? A firmware is the software of the program. So as you know, recently, WhatsApp allowed for 8 users to have conferencing, 8 users for conferencing. Okay, so basically what happened is, but it will only work if the students update the firmware. All right, the firmware. So there were a few classes where they were started, hey, how come there's only 4 can come in? The reason was because the firmware was not updated. So these are very simple housekeeping things which we need to look into. Pre-delivery checklist. We really need to make sure our tools are working perfectly. All right, really have to. I give you one example. Yesterday I was having a webinar with an external party. So what I even did was I set a second laptop switch on next to me, just in case the laptop I'm using breaks down. So at least I have the second laptop over there. Because the thing about technology, ladies and gentlemen, is this. They can be reliable 99% of the time, but at 1% of the time, it will be the critical time that it actually fails you. So it's always important for you to have option A, option B. If option A doesn't work, you have a 3 o'clock class and your laptop does not start up. What do you do? How do you go about? So you need to do good housekeeping and check your tools. Which brings me to checklist number 12. Okay, check your environment. Where are you? Where are you sitting? Look at your room over here. Are you in a comfortable area? Okay, make sure that you are comfortable, the chair that you're sitting. Because if you are doing a lecture, you are doing 2 packets for 3 hours, you're so engrossed. After finishing that 3 hours, if you don't have a good seat, my friend, I bet you will get backache. Okay, because we are teachers, we get so engrossed and so enthusiastic in the things that we do, you know, and we forget about the well-being of ourselves. So make sure seating positions, make sure temperature, not too hot or not too cold, make sure lighting, noise, and of course distractions. So it's important for you to plan yourself. Like for me, when I was working at home, I used to do meetings and webinars in my room. I got a study room, but once I go in, I will put a note outside there, busy until what time, so that when my family members walk around, they see, oh, do not disturb until 4:30. So at least they would know, because if no, they will just open the door and there's going to be, you know, distractions and so on. So this is also critical. This is also very important. We tend to forget this. But these little things that will make the whole delivery itself more efficient. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, the final one on the pre-checklist, number 13, is relax. We know it is not easy. Many of us that came into online teaching or online delivery was very much reactive. Okay, because when MCO kicked in on the 18th of March, we were still not very much in the know of how things are going to be done. But through the dedication that many of us teachers have, we managed to go through. But it is also very tiring. Very tiring. I'm hearing news from my colleagues that working days now are no more 9 to 5 or 9 to 6, because they are getting inquiries from students even 10 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night. So I tell my colleagues, you draw the line with the students. But my colleagues are very dedicated. They say, no, Gabe, if they need help, even at 10, 11, I will be there to help them. So this is what, when we see, we need to relax ourselves. We need to pace ourselves and relax, because this is something very new to us. And this is a new environment and a new norm for many of us. And what I can say is, in the long run, we can only get better. We will only be better, okay, at the end of the day, when we look into the way that we deliver our lessons. All right. So Hema, can we maybe take another 2 more questions?
Okay. Very important question is,
Okay.
will the slides be shared later on?
Okay, yes, it will be shared. It will be shared. But please take note, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a definitive guide. These are just feedback that I've identified based on my own observation, my own reading, my own practices in teaching itself. Okay. Mhm. And one more, Emma?
It's actually a two-part question from two
Uh-huh.
different people.
Okay.
Would you have any knowledge of shared experience in terms of calculation modules? It might be
Calculation modules,
something,
mathematics, and so on, is it?
and the other one is, do you think that video simulation on skills required, does it help or not?
Yes, yes, yes. I'm very much into the video one. Okay, so let me take the second question first. I'm a hospitality person by training. Okay. So basically, I find, yes, you can learn, but you won't excel. That's where the difference is. So if you're looking at video simulations, you can learn the skill. Okay. Now, we need to understand this, ladies and gentlemen, at this current environment. We want to make the best out of learning of our students. We may not be perfect, but we want to make sure that if the students need to achieve 80%, whatever we do, we can push until that, or even not, we will push until 60% first. So later, when the MCO is lifted, we will cover off with the practical elements. But it is very important for us to understand that our goal is for them to have knowledge. So video recordings, video simulations, I totally agree. We can see, but this is where there is a big but over there. It's a big but over there. All right. It is like this. There must be a learning or a demonstration of understanding of student after they observe the video. There must be a demonstration of understanding. Now, a demonstration of understanding in this context, because we cannot go to labs, they cannot demonstrate there. They must be able to demonstrate in writing what was actually done, how it was done, or maybe a reflection of what was done wrongly. But the key element here is student must demonstrate their understanding itself. Okay, so they can watch, then they demonstrate their understanding. You will find that it is still not as good, because tell, show, do, the best will still be practical classes, but this is a stopgap measure to a certain extent. All right, then slowly we will evolve. We will evolve in the way that we deliver to ensure that the students are able to achieve a higher level. Okay, what was the first question, Ham, again? Sorry. I can't hear you, Hema. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. Could you share your experience with calculation modules?
Okay, my experience, what I have seen on calculation modules is like this. The teacher teaches, then what they do is they get students to do the work, and then students snap their work using mobile phone, WhatsApp, send it to a central, our LMS. What we're doing here in KDU is we use open learning. Open learning allows for forum teaching, where students can send their answers in there, and then the teacher will look at their answers and then do discussion. So that is what we do over here for calculation. So that is the method that we use. What we do is to ensure that the students will still be involved in doing the actual work itself. So we use technology in many different ways. All right. So ladies and gentlemen, It is 4 o'clock sharp, just nice. I would like to say thank you for attending our session. I hope it was good. I hope it was beneficial to you. As I would like to say, this is a sharing session from what we have seen, our colleagues in the Teaching and Learning Center. So I would just want to emphasize today's session is on the 21st is done. The next session, please register on the 29th of May. Something very interesting from our colleagues from Penang. That will be 3 to 4 online assessment. All right. With that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. It was a pleasure having all of you here, and I hope it was beneficial. Thank you and have a good day. And for those who celebrate Hari Raya, Selamat Hari Raya. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.